Hello, Libra. Welcome to the Plaid Sheep Oracle. You have a very spring kind of related reading. And it is spring up here where I am in the Northern Hemisphere. Not officially. We haven't reached the spring equinox. But nature doesn't care about our labels and how we decide these things. It is unconcerned and proceeds. We can see buds on the trees. They've really been there since the end of January in many cases. But it's warming up here where I am. The sun is higher in the sky. And the card that came out for you is the creative force. The life force, the viriditas. Now the underside, or the visible underlying, is the illusionist. And then the bottom of the deck is self-love. But also this, right, seeing the reflection. So there is something now, Libra, about breaking through illusions about the self. And this is a theme that has sort of been coming out. There was a Virgo reading about seeing beyond the self. There was, I just put out a pick a card that came out this morning about what you don't see about yourself. And then we have this Venus retrograde that's happening where she moves from the evening star to the morning star. And just as she's disappearing, just before, when she's about 17 degrees from the sun, she's going to meet up with Mercury, who's coming the other way. Right? She's moving backwards, he's moving forwards. They're going to meet at 8 degrees, 47 minutes of Aries, while the sun is still in Pisces. This happens on March 11th. And then interestingly, they don't meet again until November because Mercury moves past her. And then though he will retrograde himself, he never catches her up during that retrograde, and he turns first. His retrograde is shorter. He turns on March 15th, and then he will turn direct on April 7th, where she doesn't turn direct until April 12th. And he starts moving back, and then they meet again in November. And interestingly, they meet at 22 degrees of Scorpio. So there may be, I don't know, something about that for some of you. That something perhaps will begin as Mercury and Venus meet now in the next couple of weeks. And then again in November. Perhaps it will complete or come to a culmination of some kind, or a resolution, some creative project. But there is a thing here about self-revelation, and Aries is kind of the sign of the self. It's often considered the I am, the sign of the individual, the beginning. We have here the Seven of Pentacles. And I think this is something that you've been contemplating working on, exploring more about yourself. You know, and I want to say that this, oddly, is not really about other people. It's sort of interesting because Libra is the sign of other people. It's the place where the other side of Aries. If Aries is the I, then Libra the we. But it's more about how you are feeling in yourself. How you see yourself. Right below that is strength. And then the Magician. And then actually I'm seeing now the Star. Oh, and Death. Who's under Death? Oh, the Nine of Cups. And then I'm actually going to point this out. This card came out in my personal reading this morning, and it made me think all about spring and Easter and Ostara. Today is Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras. Tomorrow, Ash Wednesday. It's the beginning of Lent. It starts now and ends on the Saturday before Easter. And all of these things do have meaning, whether you are practicing Christian or not, or practicing pagan. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we have this energy of spring. And I don't care how many planets are retrograde at any given moment, that upswelling of energy is going to happen. The bottom, interestingly, as we've seen, the Six of Cups here is the Six of Pentacles. And there's something today about making a beginning. You know, he's putting a coin into that bowl. About something starting, something beginning. When he puts that coin in, it'll maybe tip the scales to that side. And then we have the Three of Cups. Here she's showing up with this rabbit. A sense of fertility, of spring. You know, of Venus and Aries. The spark, the conception moment. And that it does have something to do with the mind, because she's going to meet Mercury. And then they're going to retrograde together over almost the exact same space. She goes from 10 Aries to about 24 Pisces, and he goes from about 9 Aries to 26 Pisces. So there's something about body and mind, about the self and the mind. The self and perhaps how we communicate and how we talk to ourselves, how we see ourselves. Right, we have this Ten of Swords, this spring. This is the growth after the end. And the growth of the self, it's a tricky thing, you know, because we are born and that is the self, but then we are changed by our experiences. We grow, we expand, we learn. And I think that this seeing the self is about shedding those things that are, you know, that are armor, that are, you know, more like coping mechanisms. We don't want to shed everything because some things are really beautiful. You know, even scars can be beautiful when we accept them and take them as part of ourselves. It's actually the stuff that prevents us seeing our scars or loving our scars or, you know, allowing ourselves to be seen. This is what we want to remove. Those things that feel like a trap. Right? We have the Page of Wands, who is absolutely spring. And here, kind of the beginning after the end. And I'm also thinking that there may be something about June for you. If you're here at this reading, Venus re-enters Taurus on June 6th. And then this Queen of Cups, who I'm seeing as you, right? Because there's this stuff happening here at the crown, at the head, at the mind. The meeting of heart and mind with Venus and Mercury meeting, of mind and body, of intellect and feeling. And there's also a new idea. This bird seems to be making a nest, right? She's going to lay eggs and there'll be new ideas hatching. And with the Queen of Cups, a sense of self-acceptance, of self-compassion, and then by extension, acceptance and compassion of others. Because Venus does, right? She enters Pisces too. You know, every 8 years she's had this retrograde in Aries, but it's been moving steadily backwards. And eventually her retrograde will be completely in Pisces as this 8-year cycle moves around the zodiac. There's something this year about this year and next year about the meeting of Pisces and Aries. We have here the 8 of Swords, that mental prison that perhaps you've been in. All the ways that you imprison yourself. And again, I want to say that this isn't really about other people. You may have learned when you were little to be a certain way because it felt safer. And that may have been reality or not. Perhaps you did live in a really unsafe environment where people were very angry or violent in some way. But you may just have perceived it that way. Especially if you're a very sensitive type. Because then even the littlest, you know, your parents' smallest reaction would have been visible to you. And so we can create these prisons for ourselves. But then underneath here we have you, right? Maybe you've engaged in some sort of battle. This is the Seven of Wands. And now you're thinking, I don't need to be here. Why am I here? I've been having this battle, and why am I having it? Below that, actually, I'm just seeing is the Six of Wands. Personal victory. Who cares, right? Who cares what this other, either person or maybe, other motivation that you had that's been in conflict with kind of a freer way of being? Because ultimately, it's about our relationship with ourselves. And then the bottom has a new Seven of Pentacles. This Seven of Pentacles that's rising, expanding, coming out of the earth, growing. The life force shooting up. And then here you are, the Queen of Swords. The Morning Star. And these next three cards are, I think, things that you are going to sweep away. I don't want to say, she does have a sword, but I want to say that this isn't about slicing, cutting. It's more about a sweep. The movement of air, like the wind passing through. One, we have the Seven of Swords, which is all kinds of deception. Here, self-deception, particularly. Ways that we've hidden things from ourselves, ways that we may have told ourselves lies, or that we've restrained ourselves. In this card, the symbolism is that there's this real dove, and then the fox has this sort of false dove that's on the coin. It may be that you were concerned about monetary, financial things, or it could just be, that you presented a front, maybe even to yourself. That is being swept away. Four of Cups, right? The keeping emotions bottled up. And this doesn't mean that you sort of go around exploding everywhere. But that you are able to acknowledge them, to sit with your emotions, to not bottle them up. Emotional maturity doesn't mean that you reveal your emotions all the time everywhere. It means that you are willing to feel your emotions, to know what they are, and then to reveal them and express them in appropriate ways. If you need to have a really good cry, you absolutely allow yourself that, but you don't do it in the middle of the subway or in the middle of a meeting at work. But you do allow yourself that. And then the Three of Swords, all the ways that you've been sticking swords in your own heart. Repeated thoughts that you have about either how shitty you are, how shitty the world is. Whatever those swords are that you've kept stuck in your own heart. All of that is being swept away by this rising energy, this spring, this new vision, this new understanding of who you are. We have the Swan. Now this says transformation and trusting the psychic gifts. Yes, but also the story of the ugly duckling. seeing yourself as the swan. And then being able to walk around in the world as the swan. And below this is risk. So there is risk involved. But there's risk in life, you know, as a whole. We're never going to be so completely, absolutely, perfectly in alignment with everything that there's no risk. And would we really want to? I mean, some of the juice in life is the risk. You know, if you knew all the time that you were just going to be successful all the time everywhere, I think that life would lose some of its juice. Bottom of the deck is the stag. Pride, leadership, self-confidence, self-appreciation, appreciating yourself for who you are totally. Focus, a renewed or a realigned focus on where you want to go rather than continually looking backwards. Right? It's also setting out on the road. Letting go. And then interestingly, protection. And I think it's understanding that protection is internal. That it is about alignment, that it is about really seeing yourself. That you can move out as your, you know, as your more true self. And I want to say this doesn't mean going and telling everybody off who you think has been a problem. This is really, it really feels very internal, very much about you and you. And not concerning yourself, at least for a while, with other people. It's not up to them. It's not about them. And so here you are. Right? That's kind of a, right? That's a look. Here, the wanderer. Right? It's a little mischievous, a little challenging, a little, let's go. The bottom of the deck is the lion with more of that pride sense and leadership sense. And then we have these two interesting cards. We have the wolf and the poet. And I want to say that you're seeing, I don't know, that you're seeing yourself differently. That you're seeing aspects of yourself differently, perhaps. That, you know, the wolf, there's more a feeling of pride, of leadership, of courage. But, you know, just as we, I think, have as humans a real misunderstanding of how wolves are, I think maybe you've misunderstood what it means to be the wolf. That maybe you've seen this protection aspect as needing to have this battle ready kind of stance. You know, because here in the Six of Wands, she's all open, right? She's facing out there. Her heart is exposed. And it may be that you're now seeing this wolf aspect of yourself differently. And then there's the poet. And maybe you've misunderstood the poet too. Maybe you've seen, you know, you thought that the poet had to be soft and yielding all the time. And, you know, always romantic or, you know, maybe even always a little nerdy. You know, always really intellectual. That poetry, right here with this bird, was a really mental, right? That this air aspect of yourself meant that you needed to be really intellectual. And I think you're seeing that differently. I think that maybe you're seeing the poet as more red-blooded, as somebody really embodied, as somebody in touch with Eros, with soil, with the really earthy aspects of self. I'm actually sort of inclined to read the Poet's Tale. So this archeo deck has a guidebook, and there are descriptions of each archetype, and then there's a little story. So the Poet's Tale. Sometimes, when she wasn't looking, the flowers would escape from the vase. She tried to draw them back in, but they seemed to have a mind of their own. Small colored abstractions arranged and rearranged themselves across the page. Even though she'd been the one to choose their hues and shades, she had little to say in their formations and compositions. Often they'd dance all day, picking partners here and there, gyrating and bumping wildly off the paper's borders. Occasionally, however, they'd stand still, as if refusing to listen to the music of the spheres that guided them hither and thither. Right. So, advice, Libra. 5 of Swords, rearranging the mind, rearranging ideas. You know, this 5 of Swords always seems to me like he's just seen something that he wasn't expecting, that is, you know, he's kind of pulled back, right? Something that there's a surprise there. And below that I think he's seeing is the Tower. The breaking down. And the fact that maybe it isn't as violent or as crazy as he thought it might be. Because right below that is the Star. And then this 10 of Pentacles with these two people building something together. And then I'm seeing now the Ace of Cups. And actually, I'm going to go one further to, oh, look, Page of Swords. And then, of course, there she is, the Queen of Swords. The bottom of the deck is the Chariot. So there's a willingness here to move, to change, to shift, to see an entire different self, to allow the creative force to move you. And maybe to allow the creation to have its own way. To not be forever correcting and micromanaging the creative force that wants to just burst up out of you. So we have the Seven of Swords, this polishing of one particular sword, but here's the Swan. Right, we're done with polishing the swords. Let's go. There's no need for that. Six of Wands. We're ready to go. Heart open. And, these are two Six of Wands cards that don't show anybody else really. I mean, there's a little bit of a sense in this card. There's some people, right, we see their hands holding wands. But it's really about, right, about the self, about who you are. And then the Eight of Wands. Let the creative force go. When you hold back, it's very difficult to just hold some things back and not other things, especially in the energetic sphere. Numbing or caging or suppressing an energetic aspect has effects across the system. Suppressing grief and anger means that even joy and happiness don't have as free reign. And I think the same is true of the creative force. If you're bottling things up because it needs to look right or sound right or right, in some way be pleasing to a large number of people, that, right, it cages some of that creative force. It won't be able to grow fully. So we want to release the creative force, Libra. To really know yourself and then allow that creative force to really flow through you completely. And it may be uncomfortable to begin with. You may get some strange ideas that you didn't have before. There may be things with this tower that come apart, but it's followed immediately by the Star and the Ten of Pentacles and this Ace of Cups and these two beginning Swords cards and then actually the Knight of Cups. So the rebuilding will happen, and it will be a much freer thing that isn't all pent up. And then maybe something will come to fruition in November, perhaps. And if it does, you have to come back and say, Libra, I hope you're feeling this rise of the creative force of the Viriditas, Libra, and I hope you're excited about it. I wish you the very, very best, Libra, and I'll see you next time. So long.